Hi, my name is Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the various agencies that, with the government's Brexit mindset, we are going to be duplicating at great cost to both the taxpayer and especially businesses, and how smaller businesses face the prospect of closure as a result of this. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as members of the EU, we benefited from shared access to dozens of agencies concerned largely with safety regulation. Now, I talked about the European Aviation Safety Regulator a few months ago because we had some actual figures. And it was also illustrative of the general extra costs and inconvenience of going it alone. You know, what we'd have to suffer as a result of Boris Johnson's interpretation of Brexit, which is not the Brexit that we were promised a few years ago. And it has to be pointed out that I haven't seen anything from the EU side saying that we couldn't have continued access to these agencies outside of the EU. Even if we didn't agree a free trade deal, there are still things we could have agreed, some areas of cooperation. Now, as far as I can tell, there is only one reason why we are leaving these agencies to form our own. Boris Johnson has decided that this is what we will do. And there are two huge downsides to this decision. One is purely short term, the other one is both short and long term. So the purely short term one is that we do not have time to set up our own versions of these agencies in time for the end of the transition period. Some of them will take a couple of years. And this highlights something else as well. It isn't a natural consequence of Brexit, and nor was it a part of Brexit that was promised. Brexit, even a hard Brexit, and by hard Brexit I mean one where we'll have to trade with the EU on World Trade Organization terms, didn't mean having to lose all agreements with the EU. It didn't mean having to leave these agencies. If it did, we'd have started work on our own years ago. Even if you argue that, well, Theresa May was doing something sneaky there and had a very different attitude to Brexit than Boris Johnson, which, you know, she did. He's still been Prime Minister for over a year, but he didn't start on this when he became Prime Minister. This is much more recent. Secondly, and this has a very long-term downside as well, is that it costs us much more. Obviously enough, really, our own version of the agency, such as the Aviation Safety Regulator when it comes into being, has to do everything that the EU version does. So it costs just as much. But because we're paying for the whole thing, as opposed to a contribution shared amongst over 24 different countries, we're going to be paying much more for it because we're paying for it exclusively. The UK's own version will cost, and this is what I meant about having the figures, according to the government, between 30 and 40 million pounds a year. That's according to the government that wants us to have this thing. So what did it cost to be part of the EU version? Less than a tenth of that. Less than a tenth. And it was obvious that all of the other agencies were going to have similarly inflated costs, meaning that they were going to prove poor value for the British taxpayer. And now I've seen another report on what a different industry sector's experts think to this Brexit mindset. So for chemical producers, and that is no small sector in the UK, their safety regulator is the European Chemicals Agency, or at least it is at the moment. But British-based manufacturers are going to need to use the new UK equivalent. Now, when I say the new UK equivalent, I don't mean there is a new UK equivalent up and running. What I mean is what will eventually become up and running at some point. Now, one company that employs about 200 people, the Cornelius Group, were explaining to the Financial Times that they will need to register their 2,000 chemical products on the UK version, and that this is going to be a very costly bureaucratic process with absolutely zero gain to them at all. In fact, the question really needs to be robustly asked of the government, what gain is there for anyone? Like I say, these agencies have got nothing to do with whether or not the UK adopts the same rules as the EU or diverges from them. The work that needs to be done is the same. This is pure duplication that costs everyone to do exactly the same thing. Now, the Chemical Industries Association said that if we do not agree a data sharing deal with Brussels, in other words, if we really have to start from scratch, completely cut ourselves away from the EU, go it alone in its fullest sense of the term, then the cost to businesses in this sector alone will be £1 billion. Imagine £1 billion just to duplicate bureaucracy with absolutely zero benefits to anyone. And this is in one sector of our manufacturing industry. In addition, and I'm sure this will come as no surprise to anyone, the system that British-based companies are going to have to use to register their products hasn't actually been shown to the business owners. I mean, does it even exist? And if so, why are these chemical companies not being shown it? Now, the response from the government on the general matter of these duplicated agencies was as follows. They said, there would be significant cost and burden to industry. They agree with that, but that the benefits of having control of our own laws outweigh the costs. They don't seem to agree with that. But here's the thing. This is how you would back that argument up. So, okay, having control of our own laws outweighs the cost. First of all, it's got nothing to do with laws, but let's say it did. First of all, what you would need to do is to explain to me then what are some benefits. What are the actual benefits that are outweighing these costs? Then what you need to do is you need to get the Treasury to create an impact assessment report that proves that those benefits outweigh the costs. And they need to show they're working. They have not as yet done this, so that's a spurious comment. And which we could argue the point. But there's no need, like I said. These agencies don't exist in order to be able to apply EU rules specifically. They exist in order to be able to register products for sale in a particular market. The EU version does that. So to put the costs into context, another company explained that it costs a minimum of £5,000 to register a chemical product. Now, back to that company with 2,000 chemical products. That's £10 million. And that is, I mean, this is a sizable company, but £10 million is no drop in the ocean, even for a company that size. But £5,000 is the basic cost. It can be more. A product can cost as much as £300,000 to register. As one guy in the industry said, our EU competitors are licking their lips, and that is deeply frustrating. And you can see why. Because this is a cost that's going to be placed purely on British-based chemical manufacturers, only British-based ones, not ones who want to sell in the UK. It doesn't apply to EU ones, UK ones. To sell in their own market. And it's the government applying a random cost to them to do that. And that's what Brexit really is all about. I know it's not intended this way, not suggesting it's intended this way, even on the part of Brexit government ministers driving it, but it is the reality. This move, just like every other Brexit move, makes British-based companies less competitive, even in our own market. Adding extra costs onto our manufacturers means that EU businesses get a competitive edge over us. That's what Brexit supporters voted for, is it? I'm not sure it was. I mean, this would actually make some products manufactured in the EU more competitive in the UK market, than those manufactured in the UK by British manufacturers. How does that even make sense? How is that a thing? And you thought moving from having our EU British passports made by a British company to having our Brexit British passports made by a continental European country was a bit of a head scratcher. Actually, it was multiple continental European countries. And the costs are likely to drive smaller operators out of business, is the fear, because they won't be able to absorb these costs, which means more British skilled jobs sacrificed on the altar of Brexit. And the final kick in the teeth for me is that in the article, then the talk moved again onto that data sharing deal with Brussels that I talked about earlier. Now, if the UK negotiate this, it would not only make things a lot simpler, but it would reduce those registration costs by 80%. Now, I don't know whether the UK government intend to do this or not, or whether they would agree to do so on reasonable terms. But what I do know is this. Such an agreement represents a connection to Brussels that Boris Johnson has been hostile to throughout the talks. It's the reason why we're leaving these 40 EU agencies, all fully formed, all fully functioning, for our own versions at much greater cost and that do not exist in any full form. So it becomes difficult to believe that we will agree to this deal because it would require that change of mindset. Even though it would cut 80% of these spurious costs for British businesses. Of course, if we remained in these agencies, we could cut 100% of the costs. But at least 80% is better than nothing. But then let's say they did agree, which, as it's not something the general Brexit supporting public would even be aware of, they don't even know about these agencies, so they could easily sell it. I mean, it's not like even people, Brexit supporters on the streets, were clamouring for this. But if they did agree to it, what the hell would have been the point of having set up these completely new agencies in the first place? But anyway, there it is. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.